Hi, you're watching Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone, and in this video, I am going to be doing a response video to some people who were responding in the comments section to my video about The Mandalorian, and in particular some comments I made about The Mandalorian over the first two episodes constantly being in his mask. So the mask never comes off, and the comments I made were that basically I feel that the fact that we don't see his face is starting to hamper character development, or at least it's having a detrimental effect on our ability to really personally connect with the Mandalorian as a character. There's something there that's deficient and is not what it could be, because that sort of personal connection is missing due to the fact that the Mandalorian is constantly wearing a mask. Now, before I get into the specific comments that I want to respond to, I should say this, that I have had to go overseas to do some work, so I am filming this video a couple of days in advance. In fact, I'm filming this video about a day or so before the third episode of The Mandalorian is released. So the reality is that the third episode could change all that. For all we know, the Mando might suddenly remove his mask in this episode, and a lot of what I'm saying, I guess, or what I've said in that first video about the mask, all of a sudden it becomes moot. However, the principles or the points I want to talk about in today's video about masked characters and how that plays out in a film, and how wearing a mask can be detrimental, and how not all masked characters are the same. That these points are basically universal. There's a couple of key points that, regardless of what happens with The Mandalorian, they would apply in any sort of storytelling or any sort of film, really, or visual content where you have a character and a mask. So I thought it was worth talking about anyway. The other thing that I want to talk about before I jump into the specific comments that people made was that we've actually seen a great example of how the dynamic between seeing a face of a character and having a mask on a character, how that really does have an impact upon the way the audience connects with the character, and that is in the Watchmen television series. And there is an episode 5 of Watchmen featured the character of Lookingglass, played by Tim Blake Nelson, but in this episode, we see that character for most of the episode. He has no mask on, and it really changes the dynamic. You think about the character of the Lookingglass with the mask on, and the personal touch is missing. Something there, that ability for us as an audience to connect with, to empathize, to really get our head around and to become part of the fullness of this character and their story, is something's missing. And this episode 5 really showed that once the mask comes off, and all of a sudden we're connecting with and we're seeing the story of that character without the mask on, all of a sudden now the dynamic changes for us. Our relationship with that character does change. And then even when the mask goes back on, there's a whole different dynamic now that's happening, because we've had not just the backstory, but there's that personal connection we've had. We've seen their face, and that really matters. Now, this is the point that the commenters on my video were making, and they said that basically, well, what about these other characters in film? And they listed basically 4 different characters keep reappearing in the comment section that different people have highlighted as characters who wear masks, and then people would say, it wasn't detrimental to that character, the fact that they were wearing a mask. So, why would it be detrimental to the Mandalorian, the fact that the Mandalorian is wearing a mask? Because this character was wearing one, and they were great in that great film. So why wouldn't that also be true of the Mandalorian? And how can you say that wearing a mask is detrimental? And the 4 characters that keep reappearing in the comments section, I want to talk about those 4 characters today, because there are some big differences here. And these are the 2 key principles, I guess, I really want to highlight about characters who wear masks in film or in visual content. So the first character that people keep referring to is Dredd. From the movie Dredd, it's Judge Dredd, played by Karl Urban. And people say, well, look, he was fine. He wore a mask, and you connected with that character, and it was great. It was great. The film was good, and there was no issues there. But here's the thing. Judge Dredd, you can actually see almost 2/3 of his face. He's not wearing a full face mask like the Mandalorian is, and that is a really important distinction, because what you've got with Judge Dredd is basically his eyes are covered, but you can see from sort of the bottom of his nose, almost the sort of that bridge point of his nose, right down through here. Now that matters, and that's important because mouths, the human mouth, is second to the eyes as far as the way we discern about people and the way we interact with them, and we find personal connection with people. You don't realize you're doing it, but according to what the studies tell us, we do a lot of mouth watching effectively. We don't even realize it, but we're taking in and we're making judgments about characters, about people, based on what we see their mouths doing. The mouths are a big part of, as I said, second to the eyes. The eyes get a connection with a person in quite a unique and special way, but the mouth also, you see the type of facial expressions that a character is making, and you can see those happening with Judge Dredd. And there's interesting things. Apparently different shaped mouths cause different reactions in us. This is something that was highlighted, I think it was in the last election. Apparently Ted Cruz, the sort of the curvature, the way his mouth curls at the edges, it's a particular type of curl that some people have, the way their faces form, and the way the mouth curls actually instills in people a sense of this person is not honest. There's dishonesty about this person, and so it's like almost like a difficulty he has to overcome by default. It's not his fault. It's just the way that his face is, and that's sort of the impact that the mouth can have. Just seeing another person's mouth has on us and the way we connect with that person. And so the character of Dredd is different in that regard to the Mandalorian. You can't see any of the Mandalorian's face. The next character that people have used as an example of a character in a mask in a film where the mask was not detrimental was the character of V from the film V for Vendetta. V, of course, played by Hugo Weaving. But there is a huge difference here again. Yes, like the Mandalorian, V is wearing a full facial mask. He's also got a helmet of sorts, a hat on. He's got hair. He's fully covered. However, there's a really big difference between the helmet, the mask of the Mandalorian, and what we see on the character of V. The character of V is wearing a Guy Fawkes mask, or a stylized Guy Fawkes mask, and that mask is a full human face. It's got the eyes. It's actually quite well defined, really, when you look at that mask. It's got the mouth. It's got a moustache. It's got a little goatee. It's got the cheeks. There's a lot of definition. It's a face that you are looking at, and the face actually has an expression on it. It's not simply blank. There is a sort of a wry smile, the wry smile of insurrection, you could say, of someone who has a rebellious streak to them, which obviously suits the character. And so once you add the fact that you're actually connecting with a mask, but the mask is presenting to you a full human face, which also that full human face on the mask is reflecting an important and sort of central aspect of this character, the fact that they are an insurgent, an insurrectionist, they are a rebel, and they are rebelling against the system, and the mask really conveys that. And then when you add in Hugo Weaving's mannerisms and the voice acting, and Weaving is someone who has quite a strong acting pedigree, and all of a sudden you've got a personal connection with the character in the way that we don't have with the Mandalorian. So the Mandalorian's mask has no facial features whatsoever. We are looking at a visor. And that's a huge difference. That is a really, really big difference as far as connecting with the nature of that character and sort of trying to form some sort of personal connection. And secondly, thus far, the Mandalorian, certainly in the first 2 episodes, it's been sort of pretty... I wouldn't call it flat, as in boring or underacted, but it's just the dialogue is it's minimal. It's just, there's nothing overly expressive about the dialogue or the gesturing of the character. So yes, you can definitely have a character in a mask where, because of the gesturing and the vocal expression that's happening, that works really, really well. But in this case, the character is a bit more deadpan, and so that those things are not really happening. The third character that people refer to is a Star Wars character, and it is C-3PO, played by Anthony Daniels. Now, C-3PO, again, C-3PO is not you're not looking at a visor. C-3PO has a face. You can see eyes, you can see a mouth, you can see a nose. and I mean it's permanently stuck in a particular expression, but you actually do see a face, and particularly the eyes, and that makes a big difference. Not only that, but you've got Anthony Daniels, who has that stage pedigree as an actor before he comes into Star Wars, and his voice, particularly his vocal intonations and the way he expresses, he crafted that character really around the voice, but then also the bodily gestures, they really add so much to that character. The personal nature of that character is just so evident. And that's very, very different from The Mandalorian, and very, very different. Again, the mask is not the same. The Mandalorian has a visor. You can't see eyes. You can't see a mouth. You can't make out any facial definition. You're just looking at a blank slate almost. And so that is a really, really big difference. The fourth and final character that people have referred to in the comment section is that of Darth Vader, played by David Prowse, who was in the suit, and James Earl Jones, who did the voiceover acting for Darth Vader. But here's the thing again, there's some really big difference, and this sort of speaks to the second point. So I guess the first point about characters in masks is related to the fact that the type of mask does make a difference. If you're looking at a character who's wearing a mask with facial expressions on it, already they are ahead of the pack. They have an advantage as far as connecting with the audience goes. But if you're looking at a mask, which is, in this case, the Mandalorian has a visor with no facial expressions, that's a really important distinction. That's a really important principle about connecting with a character. And we see that, by the way, with Darth Vader, before I get on to the second important point about characters and masks, and that is the fact that Darth Vader's mask, again, it's a face. In fact, when you look at it, it's actually quite well defined too. You've got eyes, you've got a nose, you've got a mouth of sorts, and you also, because of the way the mask is, you've got that helmet piece, which is separate to what is attached to the face and to the rest of the head. You actually get a form of definition similar to when you look at a person and you see the shape of their face and you see sort of perhaps the hair, imagine the hair being like a helmet. And so you sort of see a very clear sort of facial, personal type definition in that mask straight away. Then, of course, again, you've got the point that you've got that voice acting, which James Earl Jones did, and the big bodily gestures, of course, that go with that. But, you know, the voice acting of James Earl Jones, he's not just reciting lines. There's a real tension, there's a real drama. There is a lot of, as they say, he's chewing the scenery, but he's doing it vocally, and he really is chewing the scenery. He really throws himself into that voice acting, and so it just brings that character to life. But here is the second, and I think really important point of difference here between the Mandalorian and Darth Vader. As far as we know, and as I said, because I've filmed this a day or so before the third episode, we might find out more about this character and actually discover that he's not the character we think he is. Because at the moment, it seems to me that he is an anti-hero or a villain who's about to undergo some form of redemption and become the hero. But he's meant to be the hero in the story. We could be wrong about that, and maybe he's the villain. But in which case, the mask actually works really well. And this is the point about Darth Vader. Darth Vader is a villain. And so when you put a villain in a mask, you're actually aiding that character. You are actually adding something really important. You are aiding the presentation of that character in a really big and important way. When you put a hero in a mask where you can't actually see any facial definition and they are a blank slate and you can't connect with them personally as a result, especially when you add in the fact that the dialogue's very basic and the delivery's sort of very deadpan, then what you've got is you've handicapped your hero. The character actually now is on the back foot. They've got something that's a disadvantage to the presentation, the personification, and the way that character appears to us on the screen. Because a villain, it makes perfect sense for them to be in a mask, and the reason that being in a mask, like one that actually depersonalizes a character, the reason that it actually works for a villain is because of what evil is. Evil is the absence of good. And so when you look at Darth Vader wearing his mask, what do you see? You see the absence of humanity, this piece of technology which is strapped to him, which is black. Even his voice is altered. You know, there's the machined, sort of labored breathing we hear. This is the absence of humanity presented to us in a very powerful way. This is the absence of good, the absence of the personal, the absence of the humane. It's all there because of that mask. And so when you put a villain in a mask and you leave him in a mask, it works really well to amplify the presence of evil. But when you take a character who is a hero and put them in a mask, particularly one where you can't see any facial expressions of any kind, you can't define a face there, you're actually hampering that character because you are putting them in a situation where the personal is missing. The humane is not as visible as it should be so that we can connect with that character, understand that character, and really, in a big way, I mean, because obviously we can understand the Mandalorian, but I think really get into and empathize with that character and go on the journey with them because they seem very real. They are a character that could be you or I in a sense when we see them as they really truly are in their full humanity, their full personality. The person is actually present to us. And so that's a really, really big difference. And in fact, you see this a lot more pronounced when you think about the prequels where you have Anakin, and then once he goes into that mask, it's really quite a stark transformation. And it's very clear then about the way that the humane, the good, the formerly good but conflicted Anakin Skywalker has now been consumed by this evil. And the mask really adds to that and changes the dynamic. That's really the key issue for me with The Mandalorian. I suspect the mask is going to come off at some point. I think they're probably building to a moment where the mask is going to be removed. And I think if they do that, that will be quite an important revelation. And it will really add to that character. But for me, the fact that he's in a mask, regardless of whether they sort of resolve that really well with the moment where the mask comes off and they make it something quite important to the character development and to the story itself, which I suspect they will. But the point is that so far, the fact that he's been in a mask for those first 2 episodes does hamper the character development, and particularly us as an audience, our ability to actually connect with him. And when you add to that the fact that the episodes are so short, and so far in episode 1 and 2, there's been very few other characters that he's had to interact with in a meaningful way, it does make it just that little bit harder to get a read on a character and get yourself in that, I guess what you call empathy mode, where you connect with and you put yourself in their shoes and where you're really invested in the journey in a much more personal kind of way. That's not to say that you're not invested and that we're not interested in the story, but it just, there's that next level I think is missing. And those important principles still stand. The mask that he's wearing is not personal. It doesn't present a face of any kind to us. And secondly, he's not an evil character. Or maybe he is. And if he is an evil character, then leaving him in the mask makes perfect sense. And we will look back on this, I include myself in this, and we'll go, yes, that was exactly how it should have been, because it actually added to the dehumanization of that character. And it really, when you watch it now, knowing that, if he turns out to be evil, you'll go back and watch it and it will actually add and aid that character in a really big way. As per usual, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please let me know what you think in the comments section below. And if you like the content I'm creating and you'd like to see more of it, then please put a tip in the PayPal jar. You can find the link for that in the video description below, or if that doesn't work for you, go to my homepage and you will find at the top of my homepage channel there's a button there for PayPal that I definitely know works. And if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe to the channel and don't forget to hit the notifications bell. Thanks for watching. See you next time on Left Foot Media.